Hi guys, I'm Subrena. I'm a social worker from Wandsworth and I'm a person living with physical disability. I'm here today because you wanted to know about disability in employment, is that correct? Okay. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first. I have two disabilities, so I'm called dual diagnosis of disability. The first one is I have something called spina bifida occulta, which means I've got curvature of the spine. And I was diagnosed with that one when I was 8 years old.
Oh, not me.
Have you got spina bifida as well?
My spine is not straight.
Okay.
Yeah, scoliosis.
Yeah, so it's similar to that. My curvature is more at the bottom part of it. So that's the spina bifida, which I was diagnosed when I was about 8, and then had an operation to release the trapped nerve when I was about 10. The result of the spina bifida means that I walk with a limp. I've got one leg that's shorter than the other, the curvature of the spine, and a lot of weakness in the lower part of the body. When I was 23, second year in university, I was diagnosed with a second condition. This one is called CIDP for short. Do you want to hear the long version? Chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy. More or less what that means, that's an autoimmune condition. So it means that my antibodies are trying to attack me. So your body's attacking me. That's caused a lot of the weakness I have at the top half of the body and muscle aches, pain, and wastage. So that's my disabilities in a nutshell. With disability, it takes a while to get used to it, especially I think when it's forever changing. With mine, it's classed as degenerative condition. So it means that every couple of years, every couple of months, I experience a different change and I have to learn how to adapt. Anyone has similar things where they're learning to adapt with their disability?
Yeah, learning disability.
Your learning disability, you're constantly adapting?
I've got like some sort of autism that's affected by learning quite low.
Okay. So how do you control and manage that?
I do it like this. It's way too blurry.
This room okay?
This start perfect.
I've got a list of questions apparently that I can answer, but do you guys have questions for me first before I go through the list?
Yeah.
You got a question for me?
I don't have any questions, but my disability, yeah.
What's your disability?
It's autism.
And-
Autism is is that autism?
It's about autism different with different people, so how does your autism affect you?
Not sure.
Not sure. Still trying to figure that one out as well? Okay. Anyone else have questions?
Well, I've got a few rules for that. Autism problems myself, but gradually I'm controlling them a little bit better as I get older.
Yeah.
First of all, one of my disabilities, I'm autistic.
Yeah.
What else? I have epilepsy as well, but I do take tablets for it morning and night. And then I did have like small little epilepsy bits when I was younger, but as I grew up, I didn't have no more.
Yeah.
But up to this point, they came back on me. I don't know why, but something's wrong with the body. It's not functioning properly.
So the body's doing another change?
Yeah, my body's basically doing another change, and it didn't go so well, so I just had it. When I had it at first, when it came back on me, it was when I was in college. I didn't know where I was at first because obviously I was in that seizure.
Yeah.
Everything just went black and white. Not Michael Jackson's song.
Not Michael Jackson.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Got another question there?
I got plenty of jokes, but I'm going to keep them all in one.
Okay. You had your hand up.
Yeah, my name is Broken. Autism Africa, someone who very much was born with Asperger's syndrome, osteoarthritis and basic psoriasis. I would say, yeah, I have to adapt through the years regarding it. There's only like one thing that I'm very, very concerned about because I am very much in the higher autism circles. I don't know if you heard the second voice by Vanessa Wall or things like that. I basically work with her. I also work with Thain past. What I want to know is, have you ever came across, let's say, autistic individuals or people who have disabilities who have had, let's say, long-term basic employment success? Because what I've noticed is there's a lot of autistic individuals who, let's say, have master's degrees, bachelor's, qualifications, things of that nature. But because of the social aspect and the environment that basically employment is, I wouldn't say autistic accessible. Would you say there's a lot of people who have been in full-time work for a long period of time, maybe decades?
So you'd ask him more about people in employment who have autism specifically, or just disabilities overall?
I'll say specifically Asperger's syndrome and autism. Technically, no, they're not the same. Asperger's syndrome.
In my line of work, I haven't seen many people with autism, but I think that sometimes people don't always disclose their diagnosis. So I may be working with a lot of people that have autism or Asperger's diagnosis that are not letting me know. The people that I support with, because I also do stubs, I do disability life coaching and mentoring, a lot of them do have autism, and they have mentioned the struggles of getting into employment, and as you rightly say, have masters and degrees and everything else. The problem I found is that often people start to think about employment too late. So it's not about when you finish your degree that you should be starting to think about employment. It should be from the get-go. From the time you're 16, you should be trying to look at voluntary work or apprenticeships or different opportunities that helps you to build that skill. So by the time that you're ready or finish your qualifications, you feel you can go out in the workforce. Instead, what's happening is the focus is on getting your education, and now you've got all this education, you've got your piece of paper, it's kind of like, now what? And that becomes a lot more scary to cope with and to deal with, especially if your employer is not ready to deal with your disability and the reasonable adjustments. The adjustments are out there though. So employers, have you heard of the Disability Confidence Scheme? Have you heard of Disability Confidence Scheme or Committed Scheme?
Is it in collaboration with job centers?
Yes.
Yes, I've heard.
So there are a lot of employers out there that have signed up to be disability committed or confident, which means that they will make the reasonable adjustments for you. That starts from the time you've made the application. So even when you're doing the application form, it might say, do you need extra time to complete this form because of your disability? Do you want to be considered it's classed as if you have the minimum qualifications for that job, you're guaranteed to get a job interview because of your disability.
That's not what I've heard.
That's
not what I've heard. You may say that, but based off my own experiences, based on what I've noticed in this autistic individuals, is some have been basically discriminated on, and there's been many cases of it being discriminated in these so-called confidence programs, where they actually disclose that they actually have autism, and what happens is they put these autistic individuals, or let's say, even though they're qualified, some for master's degrees, they put them on a voluntary basis and basically say to the employed that we're going to be on a voluntary basis. And what happens is they go on this voluntary basis for X amount of years. Because autistic people can't exactly comprehend basically what's going on, and they have some difficulties with social skills, they will waste their time. And what happens is they will basically get free labor. Because I've actually been in businesses who've actually told me this. I just said that and I called them out for their nonsense about the discrimination that is going on in these workplaces, what needs to be kept out, right? And then next thing you know, 4 years have gone, 5 years have gone, they don't get the money. This is what I've experienced. I've never heard of someone saying, oh, you get these qualifications, you guarantee your job. To be honest, I think that's nonsense.
It's
I'm
not.
not saying you're saying it's nonsense.
No, I get it.
But basically what I've experienced and the circles, I've been doing this for about 10, 15 years. Right? And this is the type of stuff I've actually seen. So the question is to you, how can I trust you? Or how can autistic people or autistic individuals who actually want to get employment can trust you? Because what happens is we go in employment, right? We do the job, right? Next thing you know, whatever happens, the boss may think that our performance is not good enough. They strip us off, we get stripped off. It's difficult for us to have a job, then we have to go through the whole benefit system, right? That potentially is not guaranteed because they actually have to fight for it again, even though autism or whatever disability they have is lifelong and there's no cure for it. Why are they being penalized for this? This is why you have an 80% unemployment rate regarding disability. Regarding people with disabilities, they don't trust. It's about trust. I wouldn't even say it's confident. I know people in this room right now who are in full-time employment and also in part-time employment. And this is the type of stuff they've actually experienced. So that's just really what I feel like what we said.
I think the question about how can you trust your employer, the truth is you can't always trust your employer. As a person with disability myself, you're always second guessing whether are you being treated in a certain kind of way because of your disability, or is it because you're not doing something within your job role? What I've learned is that you have to be queued up about what it is, your rights and your responsibilities. So you know that when you're arguing, you're saying, well, your contract says this, and this, and I have abided by that. So you know that you can then fight the good fight and let them know that I've done everything. And the law, tell them the law backs me up and the law says such and such, so you need to support me. I find that sometimes you have to remind them what they're supposed to do for you under the law, and that way you get your support done for you. It's not always perfect. Like, I haven't got autism myself, I've got a physical disability. When they were doing reasonable adjustments for me in the workplace, just to move from here to the back of the room, they took about 3 to 4 weeks and expected me to just get by while they were doing what they had to do. I think reminding them that I am sitting there in pain, reminding them of the Equalities Act and what it says that they're going to provide for me under that law, made sure they got it done quite quickly. Because it's kind of like, I have to let them know I'm doing what I signed up to do and what I signed the contract to do, but are you doing your part? Because I feel employment is also like a partnership working. It's kind of, I'm doing my part, you do yours. I can't promise it's going to be easy. It's constant fighting. And I would say, even if you get rejected for an interview, have you ever called up and asked them why?
Yeah.
I would specifically ask them to why. Let me know why. Let me know where I fell short, what I need to improve on. Because even if they don't want to tell you it's because of autism or something else, they have to be held accountable. And there may be something you've done good or bad in that interview that you can then master the next interview with. That's my advice regarding that area. But as I said, it's not easy. It's a constant battle. Shouldn't, but the reality is it is. I think because even when you try and educate your employers about disability, they're never really going to know how you feel and how it is to stand in your shoes and your experiences. So often it's you that have to tell them, for me, this is what it means. And for me, this is what I need in order to do my job successfully. So sorry, got to be a battle.
One, from not know about getting the job, because I received like a job offer from my hit in early January, so it took me on 4 tries to get it done until I get the higher rate. But once I received that from my hit as a job offer from the lady at the Broadway, I get to work with my key worker to deliver training to people with autism, Down syndrome, brain injury, and other conditions. So it's not just like at the NHS mind, it can be anywhere, it can be at a bus garage to educate people who go to the bus garage openly. So a lot of people who are interested in buses have a condition of
So is that the PIP application form or is that apprenticeship? You mentioned 2 different things about support with PIP application form, and you said you help people into, is it?
Because I've got the job offer received from my PIP.
Okay.
Yes.
And how's that been going?
It's been very, really good. Been getting on with my key worker. Been getting on with my key worker and working with, so it's different places, but with different people. So it's the same job, same thing what I'm doing to present to the show about people with autism, Down syndrome, brain injury, and other conditions.
And what's your plan for your career long term?
I'd like to work with people with autism as I got diagnosed at the age of 4.5. So to actually experience it so that I can actually easily work it out myself and explain what autism is to people.
So you want to be a trainer or a support worker or
Either.
either?
Yeah.
Are you doing training to make sure you can do that?
I'm doing my training, as in my job training to train to get my better communication.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Why I ask these questions is because what I want us to not get trapped in is in that thing that we're just doing a little bit of work for now. We have to think long-term planning. You guys are the kind of transition age group, aren't you? So you're preparing to adulthood. So you have to kind of think, this is what I'm doing now. How does that meet or help my long-term goal? And what steps do I need to take in order to make sure that in 5 years' time, I'm in the employment I want to be in and getting paid what I want to get paid?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll go on to this question. So it says, did you need any adjustments made and how did you approach it? So these are the reasonable adjustments are needed, whether in education or in employment. So for me, the reasonable adjustments have changed over the years. When I was much younger in employment, I had no idea about reasonable adjustments. No one told me that you can get this within your employment. So my first set of reasonable adjustments, I've been working since I was 16. I first experienced or had any reasonable adjustments when I was probably about 23. Because I worked in an organization that was a disability organization and they specialize in disability in all aspects. So they kind of educated me a bit about what I need and what I don't need. So one of the main reasonable adjustments I had at that time was about the flexible working hours. So you can have that as part of your reasonable adjustments. So because my condition, I get fatigue that's attached to it, I get to work what's called a 9-day fortnight. So instead of working Monday to Friday every week, every 2 weeks I have a Friday off, which gives me time for my body to recuperate and gather energy. I also have, within the work environment, I have a specialist chair. That's, because I mentioned earlier the curvature of my spine, that chair works for my physical disability to kind of reduce the pain levels. I have a curved desk, because I don't know if you guys have noticed that the right arm is not really moving much, because my right side is much weaker. I know how to disguise it, so most people don't notice it, but it is much weaker. So I need a curved desk where that I can use it to, it's just propped up on the side, and I don't have to think about the movement. Because on a normal desk, I'll be moving my arms too much, which will cause more pain in my shoulder area. So we have like a kind of curved desk where I sit in the corner of that desk, and it makes life a bit easier. I also have a headset. So, because in my job as a social worker, you're always answering the phones. Can you imagine trying to answer the phone and take notes when your right arm doesn't really work that well? It's quite difficult. So what I do is I have the headset which allows me to answer the phone, and then my hands are free to take notes and do things as I please. Other reasonable adjustments also include not always just within your work environment where you sit, but within the work building. So I have where when I'm coming into the building, I can call our car people, I think the car people so they can move up the door. Because I need to be able to get into the building, and if you've noticed, when you're in most places, to swipe your card is always on the right-hand side.
Right-hand side, yes.
That's my weak side. So I'd been trying it for a long time to struggle and do it, but I realized that this wasn't working for me and this is what I needed. So they allow me to do that. There was struggles getting the right adaptation in that respect, because I think I was offered to have a way where I could have a remote control that would open the gate, but that would be the other side of the building, so that I could park my car the other side of the building, and then walk across. Another reasonable adjustment I have that is not really provided by my employer, but provided by Motability. I drive a Motability car. So I have all the adaptions and controls that are on the left-hand side, which is the stronger side, and that enables me the freedom to get to and from work as I please and not be dependent on other people. What I've realised with reasonable adjustments, it's not just about your work, it's not just about what the government can provide you, but it's also about yourself. A lot of the reasonable adjustments you do is the adaptations you make to how you do your job. Knowing when to say no, knowing when to say yes, knowing what are your limits, and not being afraid to tell people this is what I can do and this is how I can do it. Because sometimes people, they only know one route of achieving a goal, but you might know a completely different route that's easy for you and makes more sense to you. The task is still achieved. So sometimes it's your responsibility to tell them, this is what you want done, but I can do it this way. That's you making a reasonable adjustment, something that works in line with how you think and how you function. And I also realize that part of reasonable adjustment is also your mindset to disability overall. I think when I was younger, I saw disability as a barrier. It was more a list of things that I cannot do. So I can't do this and I can't do that and I can't do that. What I started to realize is that it doesn't have to be a barrier. It's about, I can do it, but there's a different way that I can approach it and do things. And realizing that sometimes I think the challenges or the things that disability teaches you help to develop new skills. So I'm someone that's always a creative thinker, because I think because my body is constantly adapting, you always have to find a brand new way of doing a completely different task. That transferred into your work environment is actually a good skill, because it means that you can constantly be on the ball, constantly thinking and analysing, and your employers will love it. So I think for me that's disability and reasonable adjustments in a nutshell. Any questions? I do ramble, apologise.
So when I was doing some training at Malden the first day, we did a presentation to the learners what a reasonable adjustment is. We showed a video rather than showing stuff that's in the wrong place, like Mickey Mouse and it's like what? So we try to fit things in the correct part of the form of what she actually needs to.
And how did they find that when you did that? How did they find that when you did that exercise?
They did that exercise.
Yeah, when you did that with people.
It's from what I've heard, but that when I was about to finish work, I'm just doing what I was saying afterwards, before what you said about reasonable adjustment, it's linked to what it actually means to you and why.
Okay. And are you aware that also having a one-to-one worker and a support worker is part of reasonable adjustments?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions from anybody else? Yeah.
So say for example, you want to work, and as you say, there's some things you can say yes to, and you say some things you can say no. But what about if the boss, say for example, you say no to certain things that obviously certain people with disabilities have limitations, and let's say the boss says they may have to sack you, may fire you. How do you really go about it?
There's always a disciplinary process. So your boss can't say, I'm firing you just like that. They have to go through several steps. And also, when you do have a disability, they have to show that they have made reasonable adjustments in helping you adjust to what they're saying no to. So they can't just say, oh, he said no, you can't do it, that's it. No, they'll ask them, okay, so what alternatives did you provide? How did you support them to achieve this? So you're always supported. But remember I said before, you've got to know your rights. So if you're not aware, you may say, okay, and leave it like that. But if you are aware, you can ask them, so what are you going to do to help me kind of achieve this? Because I'm not saying I don't want to do this, I'm just saying I can't do it the way that you're saying. So it's about pursuing it that way.
And negotiation as well, it's really important. Because everybody gets asked to do something at work at some point, and their immediate reaction inside them is to sort of, oh no, absolutely not. And sometimes you do have to say that to your boss, because they have said you're going to have to go and present in front of a whole load of people that you don't know and do this. And if you can say that to your boss and say, I'd really rather not do that, I'll be happy to to create the presentation, I'd be happy to do the IT, but I'd rather somebody else did the presentation. That's negotiation, because then you can say the bit I really can't do, or the thing I really would find very difficult is that bit. Your bosses are more logical, I think, I hope, aren't they? More people are not in a managerial position usually in order to try and make you mess up. They'd be more likely. I'm at the moment looking at setting up an apprenticeship at the town hall to have an apprentice, a young person with special educational needs and disabilities. Bless you. Be an apprentice to me, and I'm trying to think about different things they could do through a year or 2 years that they could do. I'm not thinking about things they can't do. I've been talking to Subrena about what a young person could do, and what at the end of it they'd be able to say, I did this, I did this, I did this. Not, Eleanor said to me to do this and I couldn't, and then she said, well, that's useless. That would be a very poor way of working with people. I would like to be able to make it. So the council is certainly looking at this at the moment. Going back to what Subrena said about work experience, it's incredibly important that if you ever get any chance of work experience, but I agree, it should really not go on for more than a couple of weeks. At the town hall, we do have some young people who are coming in and working for us. They're getting paid, because we're not treating them as unpaid interns, or we're not paying them. But other employers, I think it's quite reasonable for an employer to test you out, and for you to test them out, because you might just decide, God, this place is awful. So try and get as much work experience, and anybody who's got a 16-year-old friend or relative, tell them from even 16 or younger, getting an idea, because you may in your head have a theory about what you're going to do. I'm going to be a surgeon when I've finished. And then actually discover, as I did, trying to pierce somebody's ear, I couldn't do it. I didn't have the gumption to do it. And that was a good moment to learn, probably not a surgeon. I think all of you need to try and put your tentacles out, put your feelers out to any family member or anybody you know, godparents and people like that, to say, is there any chance I can come and have a bit of work experience at your place? Because I think having work experience then means that when you are in an interview and somebody says something like, well, why do you want to work in a shop? And I would have to say, actually, the idea of working in a shop and having random people come up and talk to me is my idea of hell. But I would have worked in a shop and would know that, because I've worked in a shop and I do know that. I just think it's really important for you to get out there and get as many different kinds of work. I agree, Jessie, with the point about being, what's the word, abused, really, or taken advantage of is very unfair. But I seriously don't think most employers would be wanting to do that. I hope they would be, because I, as a manager, I'm quite anxious about looking after a young person who'd be coming to work for me, because I've got 2 children who have autism, so I kind of know some people with autism, but other people's children with autism or other people's children with another disability, I might be quite anxious about how I support them while they're having work experience or doing an internship with me. So it's for you to go out there and be really good ambassadors, and when I say something to you and you go, inside of you, you're going, no! But you can actually politely say, can we discuss that? I really don't fancy doing that. As we were saying about, not going to the complete no and then the whole thing breaks down. Talk about things, discuss things, because I've discovered I can do stuff Like, my idea of hell used to be talking in front of 400 people. I can do it now. I've had to do it a few times. I'm not as bad as I thought I was. But, you know, I never would have learnt that unless somebody had asked me to do it and said, well, just try a bit. That's what work experience gives you a chance to do. Or not be a doctor, because I'd have been so squeamish I couldn't have given an injection.
And I think you have to remember that when you're in employment, you're often the one educating your employer. So when you're saying no, say no and explain. I'm saying no because such and such and such, and this is how it affects my disability. And you may never know that the education you've given your employer will affect how they treat all the staff members. So see that as your responsibility, that you are educating them because they don't know. You have to educate them.
I'm a bit educated about autism because of my children. A bit. They appreciate written instructions. They appreciate being warned what's going to happen. In a more detailed way than I would expect. So I got some ideas, but other people's disabilities or needs, I don't know until they talk to me. I'm also very nosy, so I love finding out what helps other people. It's really useful to me. I like to be polite. I don't want to offer to help somebody who doesn't want to be helped, but I want to be able to offer somebody the help they do want. So it's for all of us to be polite to each other and maybe say something like, is there some way I can help you with that? Or you can help me with this by doing this. Would that be pretty fair?
That's reasonable adjustments. Having that discussion about how I want help, when I want help, because there's some help that can also be a bit more disabling. So if someone's helping me in a way that I feel I'm fully independent and they're insisting to help me in that area, I'll become quite frustrated.
There are lots of different ways that you can be supported into getting work, and I'm very keen because 2 of my sons at the moment are possibly going to university, but the one who has Asperger's, I'm not sure if university is going to suit him. I'm trying to find a way that he can do a more practical way to get into work, because I think he needs to be actively doing things with his hands and learning things in a more concrete, literal way than perhaps sitting at university for 3 years. So, you know, I'm really interested in that.
I've got a question.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So you say that some disability, well, you think that university is not, well, you wouldn't say it's practical. Based on my experience, because I have Asperger's syndrome myself, I could share some stuff. What I had to do to basically my qualification, I have done work in the past, paid, unpaid, also worked in some businesses part-time as well. The best thing that, because I noticed there seems to be a trend for a lot of people with Asperger's syndrome, once they get to the higher education level, that's where things start getting more problematic.
Yeah.
Right, because I've kind of noticed, I don't know, this is autistic or whatever. Sometimes they get stuck at level 3, or sometimes they can't even get to foundational degree or something like that. I've noticed that a lot. Is really, I think, part-time courses is really, really good. Meaning a course where they could go in, they could take a their shoe out, and basically it's a structural thing, and really they learn on base of their own pace and find their own learning system in terms of learning basically at home. Because that's what I did when that was basically my alternative to higher education. Same way I'm going to buy it when I'm basically qualified to become an accountant. So that's really what I would say is the one really, really good way of doing it. Because I have a lot of autistic people who come and say it, and some of my friends and things of that nature. So yeah, that's a good way to look into.
Thank you.
So with your accountancy, because I know a friend that's doing it through, like she's never been to uni and has done it all within the job that she's in. So you're going to look through those kind of routes.
Yeah, that's just how you can do it. Because with my accounting course, thing is I can't get funded, but I have to basically raise the funds to do it. I have to go to like a college part-time. It's like 1 evening during the week, and then I just basically check in and they tell me what I need to learn or whatever, and then I just have to come for an exam. between that, the course is around 2 years, but it's really just one day of the week where you go to college part-time, get your CPA, basically your or your ACCA, whatever, accountancy order basically. But yeah, but I'll ask you two questions as well. Have you ever came across like autistic people who have worked from home, or let's say from remote working from their workplace? Or have you also came across people who have successfully done like full-time work for a certain amount of time? Because I noticed that a lot of autistic individuals, they can be part-time or full-time is where things get more problematic. Because a lot of autistic people, they process a lot of information, they get mentally fatigued very, very quickly. So that's just really my question to you.
Well, I find that most employers now do flexible working. So whether you have a disability or not, most employers will talk about flexible working. And what that means is you can work from home, you can work in a different room or room within the council, like what I explained, different times of days during the week or having a day off. So for that, you won't have any problem. Because they also, it's their benefit, it's cost saving. They want the more people at home using their own electricity is better for them. So that part you don't have to worry. And I think there are people with autism that are in full-time employment. As I said, not everyone discloses their disability because they're scared of how everyone's going to react. So I can't give you statistics and facts and all that kind of stuff, but I'm sure there is. Is that you, Eleanor?
Well, my father had a disability. He had epilepsy, which meant that when he was born in 1935, he was described as mentally incompetent and wasn't expected to have children or have a job. And this was a bit of a disappointment to him because he'd wanted to be a sea captain like his father. My grandpa was a captain in the Navy, and you can't be in the Navy with epilepsy even now, I don't believe, because you can't drive if you have fits fairly frequently. So he was a bit disappointed as a result of that. He was lucky that his mother, when he was about 18, she had an inheritance and she bought him articles, which was like an apprenticeship, to be a lawyer. He eventually, because he had lots of difficulties being epileptic, and we realise now autistic, he had something like Asperger's. He had real difficulties with meeting time, getting up in the morning, getting to places, timekeeping and all the rest of it. So eventually, after 9 jobs in 2 years, he was able to set up a practice from his own home. And he practiced there for the next 40 years. So it worked for him because it meant that he was able to go into the office in his pyjamas. As a child, I just assumed all lawyers went into the office in their pyjamas unless anybody was coming in to see them, and he could choose his own times, and he tended to run late hours because, again, that suited him. I think my children are very similar. They find it hard to get up in the morning but can keep going longer later at night. So he was very fortunate that he found a job where his occasional absences, because if you've noticed somebody with epilepsy, sometimes they have a few moments of absence. We genuinely discovered his clients thought he was having deep thoughts. So it worked for him. One of my sons is at uni doing very well. He has to go to bed early because he finds full-on interaction with people to be very tiring. So for a student of 20, he does a few late nights, but he actually goes to bed about 10 o'clock, and he knows he has to pace himself to be able to do the sort of social interaction and sort of sensory, because his auditory processing is a bit slow. So when he goes to lectures, it tires him out a lot. But there are ways of getting, you can get disabled students allowances, which is where my son has got himself a rather super duper laptop and some programs and things that are supporting him at uni. And that when he does have a job, I'm hoping that they will similarly support the fact that he needs some adjustments.
Access to work will help with that.
Access to work, and just generally adjust, because he's worth having, but he just needs a little bit more looking after.
And when it comes to disability in general, like I can say through my employment, I've met people with full-time employment, people that have strokes, people that have severe arthritis, people like me that have physical disabilities, people with different degrees of visual impairment, which means their font size are probably
massive,
yes.
Massive
and that big. doing a brilliant job, and normally the person someone comes to for advice and information. So there's different people with different levels of disabilities in employment. I know people that have personality disorder, depression, various mental health problems in employment and have been in employment for years. So it is possible. It's just about, as I said, knowing your limits, getting the support you need and how you need it. Any other questions? Or am I going back to the paperwork? I like this paperwork. Which one should we choose? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo?
Oh, yes, I was going to say, how did you get your first job?
Okay.
Because you said you started working when you were 16. It's an outrage.
My first job, I walked up and down Lewisham High Street for several weeks trying to get a job. In the end, I ended up at Burger King. I was at Burger King for 2 years until I got sick of burgers. That was my first job. I think at that point, I didn't really, although I knew my disability, I didn't really see it as a barrier. It was kind of, I want a job and someone must give me a job. And I'm going to do my CV and I'm going to talk to as much people until someone says yes. And that's kind of what I did. So my first job was Burger King. And then I went on to do a lot of retail jobs and I realized that I hate retail with a vengeance. I hate retail.
Entirely.
I especially hate the people that come every single Saturday to return the clothes they bought the previous Saturday. You know when you know their faces? So I did get a bit mean in the end. They said, does this look nice? I'm like, yeah, of course, because I know they're coming back next Saturday to return it. Those were my first jobs. And then I decided, because I've always wanted to be a social worker. So I think when I was about 18, I decided, okay, no more retail. I'm not doing anymore. And I focused on more care jobs. So I did stuff like outreach work and support worker and anything within the care profession. For me, that had specific challenges. I also did youth work, so I was a youth worker for about 15 years. The challenges with that is that because I present as someone with a physical disability and I'm working in the care profession, sometimes people forget that I'm the worker. I've had times where I'm the lead person on shift. Police has come because one of our young people has run away and they're looking over me to the person behind me and asking, can I speak to the person in charge? Because I don't present the way I'm supposed to present.
You look too young.
There's that too. There's the genetics that just look young. But there are the challenges. I think because of the profession I want to be in and because you're in the care profession, people still have an image of what the helper is supposed to look like and what the supportee is supposed to look like. And I don't quite fit those categories. So that did bring its own challenges. I think one of my biggest challenges is when, you know, often when you get support workers that do double up work, so you have 2 workers, what I found would happen is that the other worker, in their mind, will think that they have 2 people to look after. So the way they would talk to me and treat me was not correct. So I'd have to educate a few people, just to make them know that I know what I know and I have the skills that I have. So I think for me, the biggest challenge in employment has always been people's attitudes. It's kind of their perception of what you can and can't do. And often, I think that's why I don't always tell people every level of my disability and the impact, because I feel like I'm giving them information for them to make judgments. So I let people know what I want you to know, when I want you to know, and what I feel you need to know, kind of a need to know basis, because I know my limits. And then I think in social work, how disability has impacted me is maybe the roles that I've chosen. So at the moment, I'm the duty manager of my team. Not because I like management, mainly because my disability is degenerative and has got worse. So I was having a lot more falls, finding a lot more difficulty going out to see service users. You turn up and it's a flight of stairs to get there and there's no lift. You kind of have to think and react. You remember what I said before that sometimes the reasonable adjustment has to come from me. I had to start thinking, okay, I know I can do my job. I know I've got the skills. How can I still do my job and still help people, but in a different way? And management was that for me, where I can still use the skills I've got and support other people. It's just the going out and about, it's not as practical for me anymore.
Awesome.
Thank you. I like that. Awesome. I'm gonna use that. Any more random questions we're going to look on this?
Apart from you're awesome.
Apart from I'm awesome. I'm going to be saying that all day, by the way, I'm just awesome.
No, you don't cover that.
Yeah, he asks us here about have you experienced bullying or harassment. I think because I'm quite vocal and I've learned to be vocal, even when inside I'm shaking like a leaf, I've learned to be vocal. I don't really experience any bullying and harassment because I normally tell people this is how I am, this is what I can do. That's kind of my mentality, that I won't accept other people putting limits on me. I won't accept other people putting barriers on me because I know my worth, I know what I'm capable of. They just don't know and they're missing out on the opportunity. So I haven't experienced that yet and hopefully I never will. Frustration, yes, but never harassment. I think the last question I might focus on is what is the best bit of advice you would give to young people who are either thinking about or joining the workforce? I think for me the first thing is to know yourself and know your disability. So know what it means for you within the workplace, because once you're aware of it you can then say the adjustments and stuff that you need in place. Know the law that backs you up, so that's the Equalities Act. Know the law that backs you up in the workplace so that if you don't feel treated fairly you can then quote the law. Even if you don't know the ins and outs of it, just say the name of that law and they will know that there's something they're supposed to be doing to protect you. Make sure you're doing a job that you are passionate about and that love, because I think disability brings its own challenges in work. And if it's a job that you hate and you're dealing with disability, it's not a pretty sight. So make sure you're doing a job that you're passionate about. When you need support, ask for the support because it is out there. I think the problem is that sometimes we're scared to ask for support because we think that people will think of us as inferior or not capable of. But the trick is if you ask for the right support, you can excel and do bigger and better things. And I guess never give up and keep trying.
Oh yes, I use that word a lot.
Do it. And make sure you're earning some cash. We don't want just constant volunteering work, some cash. Yeah? I think that those are mine. Yeah. That's it. Thank you guys.